Welcome back to The Heat. Part of ISIL's success has been its ability to recruit young Muslims seeking a new life and a sense of purpose. Michelle Shephard is a filmmaker, author and award-winning journalist. Her new CBC documentary called The Way Out is about a Canadian mother's quest to save her daughter from the grip of ISIL, a group also known as ISIS. Let's take a look.
Saida's daughter traveled from Istanbul to the Syrian border, making her way into ISIS territory. Amina followed the path of thousands of other Westerners who had joined in the early days. Her mother says that Amina knew right away she had made a mistake and called home.
And Michelle Shephard joins us now from Toronto. Michelle, thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me today.
Watching your documentary, it looks and sounds so much like a movie, something that Hollywood would produce. But, you know, it's a real story. It's a very real story and a very powerful story about a mother's effort to save her daughter from Syria. How did you come across the family in the first place?
Well, I've been working on the national security beat at the newspaper since 9/11, and a lot of my focus has been on covering Westerners who go and join these groups. Most recently, we've had ISIL. Before that, there were other groups, Al-Qaeda-related groups. And so I've spoken with a lot of families, but what I so rarely have been able to tell is what the families themselves go through. Often we tell the stories of those who go over there, but I wanted to find a family that had gone through this. So along with filmmakers David York and Bryn Hughes, we looked for someone who was willing to do that, and we were lucky enough to come across Saida, because it's so difficult for these parents to come forward, and we feel fortunate that she agreed to share her story.
Right, you call her Saida, and that's to protect her identity. Now, she enlists the support of a group called Sound and Pictures, and they look at texts from the daughter who is inside Syria. And this group, Sound and Pictures, they warn that her pleas for help could be a trap. Let's watch that part of the documentary.
3 weeks ago, Saida got a text from her daughter. It convinced her, for the first time, that Amina really wanted to escape.
بتقول آخر ما كتبت لي أنا عاوزة تطلع وصرخة، يعني عاوزة أطلع بس تكون سكيورتي، ابعتي لي فلوس. تقولي 3 أيام 4 أيام أكون في تركيا.
اعذريني ولكن عملنا يجبرني انه احط كل الاحتمالات.
اكيد
انه في احتمال انه تكون البنت معمولها عمليه غسيل دماغ وهم متحكمين فيها بانه تحكي معكم. في احتمال انه اصلا مو البنت اللي تحكي معكم. في عده احتمالات محطوطه قدامنا وكلها حصلت قبل. احنا هذا اللي مخلينا نحط عده احتمالات للموضوع. We need to be sure that she is the one we communicate with.
So there is a risk here, not just for Amina, who is the daughter inside Syria, that's the name you give to her, but also for the people trying to get her out.
Absolutely. That was one of the challenges for the mother, that she had to determine that her daughter really wanted to get out, really wanted to defect from ISIS, and also that when she was doing this communication, that it was actually her daughter who she was speaking with. Soon after she went there from Canada, she had been married off to a German member of ISIS, and some of the times when the daughter was communicating with her mother, she thought it was actually the husband that was communicating. So there were all these steps to verify. And Sound and Picture are these incredible Syrian citizen journalists and activists who have spies that worked within the territory that ISIS controlled, and they would get information out. Incredibly brave people there that would help get the information out and expose the crimes of ISIS.
And at what point did the family establish that this was a genuine plea, that this was coming from her?
Well, I think Saida always believed that her daughter wanted to leave. After a week of being there, she had called her and said, "Mama, I've made this terrible, terrible mistake." But it took almost 3 years to verify that she did indeed want to get out through the other groups that were helping to make sure they were satisfied that she wanted to get out, and then just the logistics of getting her out.
Now, Saida, the mother, learns that her daughter is in Raqqa. That's an ISIS stronghold and a city that was very heavily bombed by coalition forces. Let's take a look at that.
Voilà, elle est enceinte de 2e et elle est encerclée. Il y a des ruines, il y a des constructions, il y a les bombes qui tombent partout. On manque de tout, de l'eau, de la nourriture et tout ça. Ils ont mis leurs pieds dans l'enfer. L'essentiel, qu'ils sortent de là.
Did Amina and her children, she had 2 children, let's not forget, did they get out of Syria?
They did. Well, they didn't get out of Syria, but they got out of the territory that was held by ISIS with the help of a group called Raqqa. And Saida actually enlisted their help, and they're a Syrian militia, but one arm of their militia has an intelligence branch, and they specialize in escorting defectors out of the group. And they say their mission is for every defector we can get away from the group, we weaken the group. So this is why their main motivation for doing it. So they actually got her out of a Daesh area with her 2-year-old daughter, and at the time she was 8 months pregnant. They went on this harrowing journey, and she got into an area of Syria that's controlled by the Kurdish forces and surrendered. So currently she is now in a camp there that the Kurds control, and Canadian officials are negotiating with them to get her back to Canada. And while she was in that camp, she had her 2nd daughter. So she now has a 2-year-old and about a 2-month-old daughter as well.
There is a part of your documentary where the family lawyer warns that she could face charges in Canada. Could she still face charges?
Yes, we don't know what's going to happen when she comes here. Our police force, the RCMP, has not said whether or not she could or she will face charges. And Saida knew this when she was working to help get her daughter out. And the way she explained it to us was, even if she has to go to prison here, of course she hopes she doesn't, but if she's in prison here, I'd rather her be here in custody than being held prisoner by ISIS.
You know, we heard just a moment ago how Tanya Joya ended up in Syria by following her husband into ISIS territory, and now, of course, we hear the story about Amina. Are you struck by the fact that ISIL's recruitment efforts have been so successful in attracting young people from Western countries like Canada to their territory?
You know, yes and no. I mean, I think many people were taken by surprise with the speed with which they managed to take over such a large area of Syria and Iraq, and the sheer number of recruits that they were able to draw in. However, I've studied other groups in the past and watched other Western youths go. So I do understand the propaganda that they use, and ISIS was incredible in terms of their outreach. Their propaganda was so savvy, and I think they just managed to tap into something at that time that unfortunately sent so many young people over there, and they grew to such a fighting force.
As we heard in your documentary, ISIS considers foreign recruits more valuable than local recruits. Why is that?
I think it's partly for the propaganda value that they wanted to start this, basically this new world order, this caliphate. And so the fact that they were able to draw that many foreigners was a real coup for them. I think also they use them as bargaining chips that they can use with various other governments. And of course, they've also said that they want to try and send some of these citizens back or have these citizens attack their own countries as well.
Now, there are many young people from places like Canada, from the United Kingdom, from France, from Germany, who've made their way into Syria. Do you know if there are still many of them left in what's left of the battlefield, I guess?
I think that the territory that ISIS controls is shrinking by the day. They control very little. However, many have managed to get out. Others have gone to other regions. And we do know that there are these rather large camps in some areas of Syria where many of them are being held, especially the women. I understand the camp where Amina is right now has almost some 400 women, some of whom would have belonged to ISIS, some probably that didn't. But it's going to be sort of the next challenge as to what happens to all those who joined and survived and now return home. What types of rehabilitation, reintegration programs do we have? Because not everybody's going to be thrown into prison.
Michelle, you're an award-winning journalist. You've traveled across the globe, reported extensively on the human cost of this war. But there was a case that I read about of a young boy in Somalia that struck you more than others. Tell us about that experience.
That was, I used to go back and forth to Somalia quite a bit, and I covered the group Al-Shabaab there. And one year when I was there in 2010, I guess it was now, I met a 17-year-old who had bravely stood up when the Shabab, the terrorist group, came to ask him to join. He said he didn't want to. He wanted to stay in school. So the next day they came to him, they took him out of his home, took him to a stadium, they cut off his hand, and then they cut off his foot as an example to others. I met him about 6 months after that had happened, and he had escaped, and he just broke my heart. And it was one of those stories you cover and you think, I'm going to write this story, I'll never see him again. It was unique in the sense that there were a group of Somali Canadians who decided to save him, and they managed, with the help of one former Somali Canadian journalist who basically became the boy's adopted father, and they managed to get him out of Somalia into Kenya. And a year after I met him, I was on a plane with him going up to Norway, where he was given refugee status. And you can imagine this kid in Somalia who'd never been outside of Mogadishu, flying 200 kilometers north of the Arctic Circle to his new home. But that was 2011, and he's still there. He just became a citizen this year, speaks Norwegian, English fluently, plays on the basketball team, and he's a remarkable kid.
Great story. Michelle Shephard, producer and director of The Way Out, thank you so much for joining us. And that is it for this edition of The Heat. I'm Anand Naidu. Thanks for being with us.